Hey everybody, welcome to this week's installment of our sermon follow-up video and home group discussion video. Hopefully this will be an extremely helpful tool for you this week. We are finishing our sermon series. It's been a short one, but hopefully a very good one. It's been a good one for us. Hopefully it'll be that for you guys. But we are finishing this week just a 3-week series out of the book of Habakkuk, and we've entitled that sermon series, Honest Conversations with God. 2 weeks in a row, Kyle has taken us home on this one, and so he has kind of charge over the discussion questions and helping us walk our way through it. So he'll be teaching on Sunday morning. In light of that, maybe you want to just set us up with where we are. We're the 3rd chapter, and what does that all mean?
Yeah. So going through the whole book, we start out with Habakkuk coming before the Lord with this honest conversation, which is what the whole series kind of surrounds, right? And he's complaining, somewhat arguing maybe, but more so just like what in the world is going on. He sees all this injustice going on around him, and so he's kind of lamenting, and he's saying, God, what is up with this? And then chapter 2, we see God's answer to that, and then chapter 3, which is this week, we see Habakkuk's response to that answer. And there's a contrast really that we spend most of the time looking at in that, and then in verses 17 through 19, where we kind of zoomed in on, of you see him go from confused, angry, upset, kind of mentality to no matter what happens, I'm in. No matter what happens, I will praise you. And we're looking at kind of the what changed, which is one of the main questions here. What changed between his first complaint and his now mindset and heart towards God, and how did that all happen? And so that's kind of where we go into this week, and hopefully tie a little bow around that and see some application.
It's okay if this becomes one of your favorite books. It's one of ours. It's certainly one of mine. I think Kyle as well. So it's okay if that. In fact, we'd be delighted because we have appreciated it so much, and we know you guys have as well. Just kind of piggybacking off of what he has said there, to watch Habakkuk go from Habakkuk 1:1 to Habakkuk 3:17 to 19, we're oftentimes looking for the transformation, and we don't know when it's going to come. We don't always see it. It's hard. It takes time to, we kind of got it all slammed together, and you get to watch that transformation, or you have been able to as you have been tracking along with us. So I completely agree with Kyle on that, just seeing what is it that has brought about that transformation and trying to understand that for ourselves too. Question number 1 jumps right in there. Do you ever feel as though God is not interested in hearing from you? Why do we do that? Why do we question that?
Yeah. So we put this question in there to be a little less terrifying as question number 2, which was sort of the original question number 1. And that one, we kind of need to prime the pump a little bit for that. So yeah, do you ever feel like God is not interested in hearing from you? I hope that this is odd, but I hope a lot of people say yes, otherwise I'm weird. Because there's certainly times when I feel like he just doesn't want to hear it, And that's not true, but we do feel that way. And I think it's helpful, and hopefully within your groups it's not too terrifying, right? But it's helpful to explore why that is, what's going on in our head when we do that. Because when we think to ourselves, God's not interested, there are some lies that we are believing that have built up and led us to that conclusion. And so this question I know it's not a super lighthearted question, but the way you can approach it, hopefully, maybe utilize it that way. Just like, how do we feel about that? And there's lots of layers to it. And the goal is for it to ramp us right into question number 2 with a little less of a jolt, I think.
Okay, and so it will do that here. What are some reasons that we find it so difficult at times to have those honest conversations with God? So just keep going.
Yeah. So, and we, this has obviously been the theme right throughout the whole series, is honest conversation with God, and we kind of want to peel that back a little bit. The premise of the whole series is that we are to have that, and I think we need to get to the bottom why, as individuals, we run from it, and why we're scared to do that. We've talked about that every week. We talk about it again this week, to kind of hopefully get a little bit further down each time. And so in your group, if you can talk about that, what are some reasons we find it difficult to have those honest conversations? Last week, week 2, I shared a little bit about a conversation I had with God, about my mom and all those things, and you can use that as an example, or as sort of a just an easy thing to reference, really, and hopefully that will have spurred other people on to say, okay, I'm allowed to feel this way. I'm allowed to talk about this. If Kyle, who's a professional Christian, felt that way, then we're allowed to as well. And please note my sarcasm, but yeah. So what are the reasons? And a lot of times it's anger, it's confusion, it's pride, which we get to at the end here. A lot of it's pride,
Right.
as to why we aren't willing to step over that barrier and just kind of bear it all before the Lord.
I don't think there's any doubt that in week 2, when Kyle did dive into the testimony, really sharing from the heart about the situation with his mom, I agree with Kyle. I would use that, allow that to be, if there needs to be help to prime that pump and to get that conversation going. That's why Kyle did it, is to help get a picture. And obviously, if Kyle's not in your group, then it's not your group discussing someone within the group's story.
It's a little safer.
It's a little safer. It's a little bit more like, okay, so he willingly shared it, and so we're allowed to borrow it in a sense, and I think that's absolutely true. Hopefully, you guys as leaders, especially if you're leading the discussion, if there's any way that you can, I would say the next best or the next thing that you could do is allow Kyle's example to help prime yours, which would be great as those leaders. Nothing better.
That'd be better.
Absolutely. Yeah. To allow that story to maybe be a segue for you to feel the courage to go into it and say, hey, I'd love to maybe share a little bit. And yeah, like you're saying, Kyle, it is better if for no other reason than you're there to have that conversation with them, with your fellow group members. And so then a third is if you see that just starting to create a sense of safety within your group to express to one another, and obviously therefore then to God, what does honesty really look like? What does it mean to really open up in these moments? That would be thrilling, to any of us to think that happened in some of your groups. That's what we would long for. So, number 3, when we don't get the answers we are looking for, we often feel as though God isn't holding up his end of the bargain. What conditions do we know to put on God in order to make us feel like he's on our side? Help folks understand.
That's a tricky one. I know it's a tricky one. I couldn't find a better way to word it.
No,
what we're trying to get to there is this idea, when and you look at Habakkuk and you look at the kind of journey that he went on through this, right? When we don't get the answers from God that we want or that we're expecting or that we feel are just and right, our faith begins to erode rather quickly. And a lot of that has to do with our pride and our belief that we know what's best in all circumstances at all times, even knowing hardly any of the information, right? But that's what we do. And so we tend to put conditions on our faith, and we tend to put conditions on, well, if God's going to be who I think he is or he should be, he's got to meet these certain standards. And so we have a tendency to say, okay, well, maybe not literally, and we may not even take stock of it. Hopefully this will help us to take stock of it. So for example, we can say, well, God's got to do these 3 things. God, you got to do these 3 things if I'm going to really trust you, right? So you got to help me meet my bills this month in the way that I expect you to. My kids got to make the soccer team, and then whatever else. These are the things that if these happen, then I know God is for me, or then I know that God is trustworthy. When these are arbitrary conditions that we put on based on our will and our desire to see whatever it is we want in our life, and we're trying to bring God alongside our plan. When we think we know what's on the front of the tapestry, or we just want to make the tapestry ourselves, or however you want to tie that in. So we tend to think, so God's got to do these things, and then he'll prove his trustworthiness, or he'll prove that he's with me, because he's coming onto my team. And all of that is backwards. All that's looking at it the wrong way.
Yeah, no, that's really great. And we do that with each other, which is only a microcosm of what we really are doing deep in our heart with, we like people that agree with us. We like people that are cheerleading us, and as soon as someone holds a standard that says, hey, have you thought about this? Have you considered this? And it's in some way it deviates. So even our own human relationships give a little bit of an indication of we probably are doing that with God as well. So those are great pictures of what kind of conditions our friendships, and if you want to look at it that way, is our friendship with God the same way. What do we put on as expectations that this is really a
Absolutely, and those things become hindrances then to those honest conversations,
Right.
And say, well, so like for back to my example, well, God, you didn't heal my mom, or you caused this, or whatever it would be. So, since things aren't going the way I expected, I'm deeming you as untrustworthy because according to my plan, it's not working, and so those become barriers pretty quickly if we're not willing to kind of constantly bring that before the Lord and let Him shape our will, our hopes, our desires in that, and if nothing else, just to kind of file away those rough edges as they come, to keep a short account in that sense. So
Good.
Yeah,
Very
it's good.
good. Okay, strong question here, number 4. We see in chapter 3, verses 17 to 19, that Habakkuk is now responding to God very differently than when he began. What has changed since his initial complaint in chapter 1?
Yeah, this is maybe the biggest one.
Right.
I don't think there are any duds here, really, but this one is kind of the point of the whole thing. So what changed between 1:5 and 3:16? Because you've got at the beginning, we talked about a little bit of this at the beginning of the video, right? But so the beginning, you've got Habakkuk, angry, distant, kind of as far as coming together on this, and it's like, God, what are you thinking? What's even happening here? I look around me and it doesn't make any sense, and we can totally relate to that. And then of course you fast forward to the end, and he's like, hey, whatever happens. So the passage actually says, though the fig tree should not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, the produce of the olive fail, and the fields yield no food, the flock be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls, yet I rejoice in the Lord. I will take joy in the God of my salvation. So he's like, you look around and everything is terrible. I mean, it's barren wasteland, and nothing that I expect or wanted or desired is here, right? So all of this looks terrible, and his response is, yet regardless of any of that, I will take joy in my salvation. I will trust you. I will take joy in you, and I will come alongside that. And so massive shift. And so the key to that shift, and we were talking about this before we put the video on. All the really smart stuff comes out before the video comes on. We were talking about.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry. The key to that, right? So God doesn't change His circumstances, right? He just kind of again turns and shows them the front of the tapestry a little bit, which is in this case is not something that's going to happen tomorrow. It's like eventually this justice will come. But what turns the switch in Habakkuk is God brings him clarity through all the rest of chapter 1 and into this part of chapter or end of chapter 2. He brings him clarity, and with that clarity comes humility. And when that humility takes its place, Habakkuk takes his place, and he sees God for who He is. He sees him for who He is, and he sees the contrast there, and he goes, He is trustworthy. He's good. I know it. The last verse on your page there, Hebrews 12:1, before we talk about that this Sunday as well, of God being the author of our faith and perfecter of our faith. And Jesus is the author and perfecter of our faith. It fits right into that. It's like so when we humble ourselves and see that, let Him take His place. He begins to shape our faith to where the way He wants it to be, to go through the circumstances He's set forth. So the big picture answer to that is that clarity brings humility, and that really is it.
It is. It's absolutely true. Allow yourself to be exposed to God being clear and revealing Himself, and see what our response really is going to be. That's why Habakkuk has been such a great book, because it is a clarifying moment in the life of a man, one particular man, and we get to see what that clarity brings. So very, very solid. Question number 5, as we wrap it up, what might need to be done in our hearts in order for us to be willing to approach God and to respond to Him the way Habakkuk did in chapter 3?
Yeah, so that's the application, that's the bow on it. So with whatever time you have left in your group, and if you feel like you want to get to that question with 20 minutes left, go for it. Make sure you just take the right steps to prepare them for that. But that's sort of the personal application of it, right? And so your answer is going to be a little different for everybody. Ultimately, what steps need to be done in our own heart to be able to come from pre-argument Habakkuk to post-argument Habakkuk, right? So pre-argument Kyle to post-argument Kyle. And so in my example, again, I don't want to keep going back to it, but we understand it, right? We have that picture in our head. So nothing changed in the walk I went on with God, right? My mom was still in the hospital, and she was still gonna pass away from all that. And in fact, it was about 2 months later, I think, that she did. And what changed was my understanding in that, and my desire to just lay myself before the Lord. And so, I guess the short answer that's applicable to most everybody is humility, right? We need to, what has to happen in our own hearts to be willing to do that is humility.
Yeah.
But there's going to be specific places in our lives where we need to apply that humility, and you may be able to get to some of that in your group time, as well.
And don't, as leaders, if you're the ones watching this right now, those of you that are leading groups, all of your examples don't have to end in bad situations for it to count. We celebrate when God does respond, and those are equally valuable, and we celebrate and we go into those and we say, wow, we prayed and we sought the Lord and He decided to heal, or He decided to provide, or He decided to overwhelm me with truly an intervention providence that I would have never believed could have happened, and yet I was praying for it, and sure enough, it comes on us. But don't be afraid of the ones where God didn't seem to come through either,
Right.
Where some might say that He didn't come through. But allow those to be the ones where His character just overwhelms that story, His character. If you've got testimonies that are especially pointed to, and He didn't solve it this way, and He didn't answer this. That's what we were talking about, the story that he shared about his mom that Kyle did last week. And so those things didn't get resolved in the way that we would all hope, and yet Kyle saw God more clearly, and it brought humility. And so the overlap of his particular story to that of Habakkuk's was so very poignant because of that. It, like in verses 17 through 19 of chapter 3, though this is going to happen or this will not happen, and all of these things that he says, but yet I will still rejoice in the God of my salvation. It's such a great, great book. So don't be afraid of the stories that don't end up with the pretty bow.
Yeah.
They are just as powerful.
Absolutely.
And I think that's really what we come away with in Habakkuk. So this is the little, keep this in mind, clarity brings humility. So I had to write it down. That was Kyle's. So anyway, we hope this is helpful to you. Definitely hope that this week's group, your groups just blow and go on that and just have a great experience closing out the book of Habakkuk. Sure enjoy being a part of it, and we will be praying for you.
Absolutely.
See you later.